Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Buffalo Plus YouTube channel. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We appreciate that all the time. We've got a special guest with us this week. He covers the Washington Commanders for the Locked On Commanders podcast. Please welcome David Harrison to the show. Thanks for being with us, David.
Oh, I appreciate the invite, Mike. How are you?
We're all good. We're all good. Looking forward to the game this week. I'm going to start out with this. How about in a big picture thing? Are the Commanders good?
They are good. I don't know where the meters are on them from a national standpoint, right? But coming into the season, everybody had them at the bottom of the league, picking top five. A lot of people talked about Drake May potentially getting drafted by this team to replace his best friend Sam Howell next season. Um, I think with their 2 wins, they've shown that they're a very feisty team, a very resilient team, and they're looking to be a team that playoff caliber teams like the Buffalo Bills find at least a hard out, if not a team that can potentially fight for an underdog or an upset win.
Sam Howell, he's made plays. He seems to have been pretty efficient. Tell us about him. Tell us if this guy is just, the last in a list of guys that have had their moments with Washington, or does he look like a guy who can at least play in this league?
The really impressive thing about Sam Howell that I've come to learn about him, and this goes back to last year. This is a young man who at one point was maybe the best quarterback in the NFL draft class, or at least a first round draft pick, and then just steadily saw his stock drift and eventually gets drafted in the fifth round. And coming into the season last year, training camp, he could have held his head low or hung his head low, but he didn't. He was a professional throughout the entire thing, and his being a third string quarterback for most of the season, I had some opportunities to talk to him where there wasn't a whole lot of people around talking to him. So I got to know his personality a little bit. Then he became the second string quarterback. Then he got his start at the end of the last season. And what really struck me is that through all of it, he was the same guy. He was the same personality, the same talkative type of person. And then going into the offseason, his QB1 and all the ESPN interviews and all these things, he's still the same guy. And that's really when you talk to his teammates, especially Bieniemy Brown, his receiver from North Carolina, he tells you it doesn't matter what situation Sam Howell is in, he is the same. And he even said, if the face ever changes, Bieniemy might actually panic because that would be a first time that he's ever seen that happen. And that honestly has become a very big weapon for Sam as he's taken on the challenge of being an NFL starting quarterback.
Yeah, I want to get to his receivers and the weapons that he has, but how about in the backfield? Brian Robinson, is he at 37 carries already so far this year?
Yeah, I mean, Brian is a guy that, he very quickly came in his rookie year last year and made quite the impression. And, coming into this season, now that he's healthier than he was this time last year because the unfortunate incident where a botched robbery attempt, cost him 4 games. Um, he's ready for the challenge. The team is trusting him. His quarterback trusts him. Eric Bieniemy, his play caller, his coordinator trusts him, and he's rising up to the challenge. Again, there's a handful of plays that if B Rob doesn't make those plays, maybe Washington is 1-1 coming into this week instead of 2-0.
You mentioned Bieniemy. Bills fans know him well. We spent a lot of time in Kansas City dealing with the Chiefs. Obviously there was all the talk about head coaching opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
So he takes this one. First of all, what'd you think when he ended up in that job, and what's he been like in that job?
I was happy because I think we all have the same question of how much of Kansas City was Eric Bieniemy, how much of it was Andy Reid, how much was Pat Mahomes, and how much it was all of him. Was all of them. And I was really happy that I was going to get to see that answer unfold firsthand. I had a good friend. He's retired now, but Herbie Teope covered the Kansas City Chiefs for a very long time, and he gave me a lot of insight into who EB is and kind of what to expect when you talk to him and all these things. And it's all turned out true. And the thing about the experience is EB, if nothing else, he is a master motivator and he likes to get after his players, but he also understands that when the cameras are gone, the media is gone, and they're just in the meeting rooms, he understands how to break it down to these guys so that they understand. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of early success from the offense as they continue to unpack what Eric Bieniemy wants from them. And the biggest thing that's been impressive in these first 2 games is neither of the games have the Washington Commanders offense really come out and been super proficient, super sharp. When they come out of the locker room at halftime, they're a much better team. And there's just something about the way he sees it, and then not just sees, but explains it to his young players that lets them come out in the second half looking like a rejuvenated team. Resilience is the word that Coach Rivera uses, but I use rejuvenated because they almost come out looking like they're fresher in the second half than they were to begin the game.
And I don't think people realize how little time there is to get stuff done at
Right.
halftime. You know, everybody at home goes to the fridge or does whatever. Man, in an NFL locker room, it is in, it is out. And you've really got to have your act together to make changes at halftime.
No, you do. I'm glad you brought that up. I actually just talked about that on my show not that long ago. I mean, it's a 15-minute break period, but depending on the stadium you're in, by the time you even get to the locker room, 3 minutes of that is already gone. You got another 3-minute walk back, so that's 6 of your 15 minutes, and you need to get re-warmed up. So you're already probably down 8 minutes or so, if not more, of that 15 minutes. And like you said, that's the time you make your adjustments. And yeah, so it just kind of shows how important it is to be on the same page coming into it, understanding each other, understanding each other's motives, motivations, and all that stuff. But then also how important it is to quickly but precisely communicate what's going to happen coming up.
Terry McLaurin, find him to be one of the most interesting guys in the league in terms of his quality of play with either different quarterbacks, ineffective quarterbacks, different systems, different OCs. What has he been like, and what do you see out of him so far this year?
Yeah, Terry is about he's about everything that you see in front of the camera is who he is, outside the cameras, and it's been a great pleasure really to get to know Terry McLaurin, and you'll appreciate that. I mean, he probably holds court at his locker 30 minutes a day every day.
We
I mean,
love those guys, right?
yeah. This isn't a guy that gives you 5 minutes once a week. Like he's going to talk and he's going to give you valuable information, but the intellect shines through because as he's giving you valuable information for hours on end a week, he's not giving you anything that the opponent can use to scheme against him better. And his calm, composed mentality shines through his work ethic, shines through his preparation, shines through his release, his route running, his break. But when he makes a big play, that's where you see the competitor in him come out, right? His celebrations and all those things, and you just know it's a ball of energy waiting for the right time to release. But he kind of has this internal discipline of I don't, he'll throw the occasional first down signal and all that stuff, but he's going to save the actual celebrations for earning the full on celebrations. And to a certain extent, it kind of shows the quiet, calm, professional, almost assassin like mentality he has because a lot of people look at him as this mild mannered type of superstar, but it's just that he chooses when the energy comes out of him.
Give me an idea on what else in terms of weapons, with guys like Dotson and Samuel, and what other weapons in the passing game would Bills fans be looking for and Bills defensive players be looking for this week?
Yeah, Jahan Dotson is a big one. He's a guy that can impact all three levels of the field. You can do things short with him, intermediate, deep. It doesn't really matter where you want to put him. He's a guy that can get free and can do some good things for the offense. Curtis Samuel has almost kind of a forgotten part of this offense. We actually came out of week one, the team's leading receiver in receptions and yards, and nobody really talked about it. But he's a guy that has running back type skills, but receiver type skills, a little bit of Debo Samuel before Debo was Debo, and I think that the Commanders kind of like to use him in that type of a route or a type of a usage. Logan Thomas, the tight end, he's going to be a big one. The concussion protocol thing, and typically in today's NFL, you enter concussion protocol. Usually, you miss at least that next game. So I think coming into this week, probably expect him to not be available. It leaves John Bates more of a blocking tight end, but he does have some sneaky receiving ability. Cole Turner is a young receiving tight end that has definitely had some flashes, and I think that when you're facing the Buffalo Bills, the Commanders are going to come in wanting to use every position group all over the field. And I think that those two young tight ends are really going to be a big factor on whether or not the Commanders can pull off this upset.
Yeah, we know Logan Thomas here. It was in the Rex Ryan time when they brought him in, gave
Yeah,
him a
yeah.
shot, converting him to tight end, and you could see the ability. So, yeah, he's in the protocol. So, like you said, you don't expect him to play this week.
I don't know. I mean, that was a bad hit. You know what I mean? And we can get into dirty hits anytime, but that was a bad one. And he actually told a colleague of mine, Candy Waller, the president of Bowie TV out here in Bowie, in the Bowie, Maryland area. He actually saw her after the game and said, "I feel fine. I think I'll be fine." We've heard players say that before, though, and I think the way to address it going into Wednesday is likely expecting him to not play. But if he can come back, it would certainly be great to see him on the field.
All right, let's move to the other side of the ball. Jack Del Rio running the defense again. Is
Mhm.
Montez Sweat, is he just in the backfield all the time now? It seems like he has been fantastic so far.
Yeah, Montez has been great. I mean, 3 sacks in 2 games. He's on pace to break the single season sack record. We're 2 weeks in, so that doesn't carry a whole lot of excitement with it, but just to kinda demonstrate the type of play that they've been getting out of him, these first couple weeks. And Montez is a guy that is really just kind of on a mission to show, whether it's this franchise or another franchise, that he deserves to be a part of somebody's long-term future. And I really hope, that he's able to show the Commanders that he needs to be a part of this future, because he's a really good part of this defense, good part of the locker room. And I think what's really helping him is he and Chase Young both this offseason went to Columbus. They worked out with Ohio State's defensive line coach. And a lot of the work there that they did was based on conditioning and making sure that these guys weren't wearing down in the final moments of the game. And when you look at Montez Sweat's game, the pressures have always been there. The presence has always been there. What has been lacking, so to speak, has been his ability to finish sacks. And this season, again, those 3 sacks, that's why that's so impactful, is because he's showing already very early that that has gotten better. And if he can stay healthy, this could be a career season for him.
What's been going on with Chase Young in terms of where he is with the organization, coming back from his injuries? I mean, he has been at times a monster player. And
Mhm.
again, it seems to have been from the outside, you wonder where he's going to be. Then he comes back and looked to me from the outside pretty effective back on the field. What's he been like, and what do you expect him to be like?
Yeah, Chase Young, his entire career, honestly, has been really weird. You know, coming out of Ohio State, I kind of believe he benefited from the Bosa's a little bit. You know, Joey and Nick Bosa came out of Ohio State and showed people that when they're healthy, they're, two of the best defensive end pass rushers in the game. And I think Chase Young got a lot of benefit from those two guys. But the question about him coming out of Ohio State was whether or not he really had a second move and a counter when he gets stonewalled in his initial move. And even with the rookie of the year award in his rookie season, that those issues still kind of came up. And then his second season, those issues really came up, and it ended up with him having 1.5 sacks through 8.5 games. Unfortunately, he got injured in that ninth game, tore up his knee, and he ended up having to have surgery on both knees, which I think prolonged the recovery period. And a lot of people on the outside looking in are saying, hey, guys are coming back from these injuries 10, 11 months. It took you 13, 14 months. And that immediately causes some sort of frustration, not just for Chase, but for the outside viewing public, who we don't have medical degrees, so we only use case studies to compare that to. Came back, had some impactful moments at the end of last season, no sacks, but still looked impactful. Coming into training camp, coming into to the preseason workouts, looked better than I've ever seen him. And you could tell he's been working on counters, he's been working on second moves. Fourth snap of the preseason, almost gets a sack, ends up suffering a stinger. And again, this process of prolonged recovery. A lot of people looked at case studies and said, well, there's guys who get stingers and come back the same game. But for Chase Young, not only did he come out of preseason week 1, he didn't repeat or return till regular season week 2. And that caused a lot of frustration from the outside looking in. And, Chase sees the stuff. He knows the stuff is being said, but he also relies on himself. And we've been telling people, when Chase gets on the field, this is a better looking Chase Young than we've seen in a long time, and I think that's what you saw in week 2, and I think it'll start to kinda unwind some of the tension, that has been around him as long as he can stay healthy.
Yeah, well, he'll be chasing Josh Allen, so will Sweat and everybody else. It's a guy you don't see, right? I mean, obviously in your division you have Jalen Hurts, who's a great runner, but
Mhm.
Allen's almost a different kind of guy with his
Yeah.
size and what he likes to do. He's maybe tried to cut back on the running. I'm always curious about this, especially to places that the Bills don't see very often, teams they don't play that often against. What do you think the perception of Allen is? Say to fans of the Commanders now who don't see
Yeah,
him a
yeah.
lot, look at him from the outside. What do you think the perception is of the Bills quarterback?
I think a lot of people outside of Buffalo look at Josh Allen and say he's an adequate passer, but a better football player than he is quarterback. And whether that's taken as a slight or taken as a compliment really just kind of depends on the person hearing those comments. But I think that Josh is a guy who knows how to use his characteristics, his strengths, and I think he's got a coaching staff that likes to use his strengths to his benefit. And I think that's very valuable. You like to think it doesn't happen in the NFL, but a lot of times, We see a player with a certain skill set go to a system that wants a different skill set, and they try to make it work, and it just doesn't work out. So I think it's been very valuable for Josh to go somewhere that lets him kind of be the best part of him. And for the Commanders, you mentioned it, they played mobile quarterbacks. Jacques Del Rio actually joked a couple weeks ago, said, when we were asking about Russell Wilson, mobile quarterback, and he said, "How about you ask me about non-mobile quarterbacks if we ever see one again?" Um, and Josh is a different kind of mobile quarterback. So even though yes, he's mobile, Russell Wilson's mobile. Jalen Hurts, you mentioned, it's a different kind. You said it. I think you hit it right on the head. And because of that, I think linebackers like Cody Barton and James Davis are going to be huge in this game. It's not going to just be about filtering him to the middle or containing him in the pocket, but you got to tackle that guy, and Chase Young is keeping him in the pocket, but he can only get an arm on him. Chase Young is a strong guy, but I don't know if Chase Young is one arm tackle Josh Allen strong. So he's going to need guys like Cody Barton, Cam Curl in the box, Derek Forrest when he comes down, and Jamin Davis to finish a lot of those plays. This could be a game where if Washington's defense can be effective, you might see a linebacker get 2 or 3 sacks instead of a defensive lineman, but it'll be because of the defensive line keeping him in the target zone for those linebackers to clean him up.
You mentioned the coaching. Sean McDermott's always tied to Andy Reid, where he got his start, became a coordinator, but he seems to have a phenomenal relationship with Ron Rivera. They speak about each other all the time with their time in Carolina together. What's it been like for Ron Rivera in DC? I want to ask in a moment about the ownership change, but just in terms of with what he's done, where they are, it just seems like they're always on the edge of being good. And he's had that reputation. I mean, once you've taken a team to the Super Bowl, it puts you up another notch. What's the thoughts on Ron Rivera, with another look of a team now going forward in Washington?
Yeah, what we've been saying about these Ron Rivera teams is they're an average or better quarterback away from making the playoffs every year. The problem is whether it's injuries or inconsistent play from backups, whatever the situation is, the Commanders don't ever seem to get average or better quarterback play for more than 3 or 4 games at a time, and that's why this thing really hasn't worked out. At the same time, this is the first year, honestly, I think Washington is really seeing head coach Ron Rivera at his full strength because of everything that's been going on that, like you said, we're going to talk about here in a minute. And I think that's important to understand, and whenever there's an ownership change, people talk about the future a lot, and Ron Rivera's future has obviously come up a lot. And I would personally hope that maybe understanding what he's been coaching under gives him a little bit of leeway, you know what I mean? And maybe you get another year out of it because almost immediately, Ron Rivera started talking about the opportunity to roster build for the first time, and to me, that speaks very loudly of what he's been working with, and you see it already. I mean, the opportunity to get the quarterback that you wanted, the opportunity to put a system in that you wanted, is already paying dividends instead of constantly chasing somebody else's cast out veteran quarterback.
In Buffalo, Ralph Wilson on the team forever from the start, and now it's the Pagulas. That was the transition. People were thrilled because it went to a family that was going to keep it in Buffalo. That was the big deal. I don't know if there's been anything recently in the NFL quite like Daniel Snyder with this franchise and the lack of success, and then everything that went with it. So for the fan base, when he was finally out, when the team was sold, for people, most of us see it from the outside. What was it really like for that fan base?
It was like the sun rising. I mean, that's probably the best way I can put it. Like Commanders fans, Washington fans, whatever they call themselves, and that conversation is still split, obviously. Um, they all came out, and it's interesting because you see mismatched logos and images on people's shirts and jerseys and hats, but they're all cheering on the same franchise, and it really feels like almost like a clan of football fans that have been hiding in caves, waiting for the big bad monster to go away. And as soon as he left and the sun came back out, they all came out, and they've been nothing but excited to see what happens with the future of this team now that Josh Harris and his group is in charge.
All right, so it's sold out, right? So it'll be a couple sellouts. There's one thing to put people in the stands. There's another to have the public back. So I want to ask you first about the public. And I know it's only 2 games, but it's
Mhm.
2 wins. And I think it's been a while since they've been 3-0.
Yeah, yeah,
In many places, they'd be like, let's sit and wait. But the combination of the 2 wins and the new ownership,
yeah.
has DC at least gotten?
Oh yeah, this fan base is incredibly excited. The first open practice to fans during training camp this year, there were more fans present than if you combined all the fans that attended all of last year alone. And that's just that's kind of the biggest demonstration of just how much things have changed. A lot of fans kinda look at this season as they've already won just because of the ownership change. This season is already a success, and they understand that the quarterback is young. They understand that the offensive system is new, and the offensive line is somewhat questionable. So, the fans are already kind of willing to give some wiggle room. But again, going back to Ron Rivera and his experience, not as many fans are willing to give Ron Rivera the wiggle room that they're giving the franchise. So bottom line, at the end of the day, like this area is very excited to support Commanders football again. Whether or not they're willing to support every member of the Commanders organization still through this growing experience that they're going to go through this season is still to be determined.
Bills fans travel. They always
Yeah,
do.
they do.
Um, the stadium, the experience, maybe for visiting fans or just in general. I know the stadium's gotten a lot of criticism. I know they're looking to build a new one there. They're doing that in Orchard Park. They're building a new one. What would you say the fan experience would be like for a Bills fan coming to Landover this?
If history shows itself, you're gonna feel pretty comfortable because there's gonna be a lot of blue in the in the stands, and again, I think there's gonna be a lot of Commanders fans there too, but yeah, like you mentioned, Buffalo Bills fans travel, as good as any fan base does. So you're gonna have a good mix of Buffalo fans in there. I think you're gonna get a good amount of Commanders fans. But, at the end of the day, it's about what's happening on the grass, and hopefully you're sitting in a seat that allows you to focus on what's happening in the grass. But I can tell you that this new ownership group has already done a lot. They've put millions and millions of dollars into FedEx Field to try to make the experience as good as it possibly can be with what they started with. It's not perfect by any means, and there's still the occasional leak dripping on fans here and there. And in the sold out stadium, that's really inconvenient because it's not like you can just go find a different seat to sit in. But they are making an effort. The sound is better, the video boards are better, things like that, and so it should be at least a recognizable NFL environment, if that's a consolation. But yeah, certainly a long way from where they want to be moving forward.
Yeah, I think this is great. I've been covering the Bills a long time, back to the days when we were at the Super Bowl in Minnesota, when the Washington Redskins at the time beat the Bills for a championship with Mark Rippon at quarterback. And I
Mhm.
always felt like they were just that fan base, maybe the best fan base in the NFL, the most supportive
Yeah.
one. And it's really been a shame to see that happen. It's kind of a little bit like what went on in Buffalo with the losing, but it was different about
Mhm.
ownership. So I think this is great for the NFL that Washington is sort of, like you say, the sun rises and back in the league. And I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a great experience for everybody on Sunday. Would you agree?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah, I'm
looking
looking
for a
for
very
a very
competitive
competitive
game.
game.
The Washington Commanders are in a rare situation where even if they lose, they could still gain a lot of respect from a lot of people around the league. And then this is a team that, but by no means inside the locker room are they going to be talking like that. That's purely outside the locker room. But again, it's just kind of one more step. And I actually just did our weekly crossover episode with Locked On Bills host Joe Marino, and I was telling him like I kind of wish this was an interconference, match. I kind of wish like the Bills were a team in the NFC because I'd really love to see like week 3 matchup versus say a wild card round matchup if that could happen, or a divisional round matchup. Like because I really think this Washington Commanders team, the offense specifically, is going to be a lot different in week 13, 14 than they are in week 3. Unfortunately, because of the situation, we only get to see this once this season, but it's a good early measuring stick. And I think everybody understands it's still very early as a measuring stick.
Last thing, I always ask this because I think it's interesting because fans go into a game thinking what could go wrong, right?
Yeah, yeah.
What's the game plan? What's the way it plays out for Washington to knock off the Bills? The Bills will be favored coming into the game. They've been the team with the more success, but what does Washington need to do to knock off the Bills?
Contain Josh Allen first and foremost, right? With the pass rush, like you want to get there, you want to get the sacks, but first and foremost, you just got to contain him. You got to contain him, then sack him. I think second. After that, it's solid tackling. They're strong tackling against the Arizona Cardinals, not as strong against the Denver Broncos, especially early on. That let the Denver Broncos get a 21-3 jump on. If you get a 21-3 jump on you from the Buffalo Bills, I don't think you're coming back from that one against a team like this one. And then contain the explosives. You know, they allowed the Broncos to have 4 or 5 explosives in the first half last weekend, and it almost doomed them to a 1-1 start in a very winnable game. So again, kind of all the things you look at and say, this is why Denver almost beat us. Those are the things you can't do against the Buffalo Bills, or else they will beat you.
Well, I think it's going to be a good one. We're looking forward to it. And for Bills fans who get a chance to see you here, where can they follow you on social media, Twitter, and certainly on your podcast?
Yeah, so Locked On Commanders is 5 days a week, talking everything Commanders football, and obviously we're focusing on this matchup this week. And I drop my episodes usually early in the evening, late in the afternoon. I do mine day of, so Wednesday practice, I'll do an episode after Wednesday practice, so on and so forth. And then on Twitter at dharrison82. I love all things football. So I spent 4 years stationed at Fort Drum in upstate New York. I've got a lot of affection for Buffalo Bills fans. I got a lot of friends that are Bills fans, so it's I love the Bills fan base. It's definitely one of the best.
Well, we're looking forward to it, and we'll see you in the press box coming up on Sunday. Looking forward to it. So, David Harrison, thanks very much on Locked On Commanders, and I hope you enjoyed this. And make sure for Bills fans, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe here on Buffalo Plus. Let us know what you're most looking forward to, what you think of the Commanders in this, and we'll get back to you on the channel right here. Thanks again, David, and we'll see you next time here on Buffalo Plus. Stop.